right.
30 different varieties of plants a week actually feels more achievable when you say there's these 6 different groups. I haven't thought about it in that way before. I know a lot of people, when you say 30, sort of go, oh my goodness, how on earth am I going to manage that? Have you got any top tips you could share about how you can make it really easy to eat that variety?
Yeah, look, diversity at the shops is kind of my main, hot tip because, instead of just buying your chickpeas, get the 3 bean mix, right?
Yeah.
Instead
Okay,
of
and
just getting
straight away you've gone from 1 to 3.
Exactly. Instead of just getting, your pumpkin seeds, get the 3 seed mix. Like those sorts of things actually can start to make a meaningful difference without costing you anything more or actually any extra effort.
Yeah.
But then I like to think of other ways as well. So, for example, next time you have a smoothie, a lot of people just have fruit in a smoothie, but why not add something like some frozen cauliflower? Or even some carrots. Those sorts of things blend up really well and actually add that whole new level of diversity. And again, that is really important because, a lot of people I see in clinics say, well, what if I don't like the vegetable group or I don't want to have any of the whole grain group. And the thing is that each different category provides our gut bacteria with different types of fiber.
Right.
So you might have the bacteria that only like the vegetable fiber. So if you don't have your veggies, then you're not going to be able to grow that type of bacteria.
Right.
And therefore, we're not going to get the skills that that unique category can give to us. So that's why, the mechanism is quite important. But those simple tips, it is at the grocery store, I think, when you're thinking about diversity.
Yeah. I mean, breaking it down to those 6 groups, there's huge variety in each of those 6 groups, isn't it? And we've talked with some of our previous experts around, if you always eat blueberries, then try raspberries, and that's just, gradually build up those simple swaps and that variety rather than feeling overwhelmed. But I love the idea of the 6 different groups. I want to talk now about anything you should avoid. What makes your GM unhappy? Is there anything you should avoid or sort of enjoy in small quantities or cut out completely?
Yeah, look, I'm very much about, inclusion, not exclusion, right? And this is based on the research that says it's more important about what you're adding into your diet versus what you're cutting out. So, if you're getting in your 30 plant points a week, you can have things like your white chocolate, which essentially is just feeding your taste buds.
Yeah.
Has no fiber in it, so not feeding any of your gut bacteria. But, white chocolate's one of my favorite food. I'd be very unhappy if I had to cut that out, right? But I guess some of the research we're looking at King's at the moment is some of these food additives, which are added in a lot of these ultra-processed foods. And certainly in small amounts are probably not going to be of any, harm. But actually a lot of people have majority of their diet coming from these ultra-processed foods. And although historically the food additives were, categorized as safe and okay to have in kind of decently large quantities, actually that was before we understood about our gut microbiome.
Right.
So we're now having to retest the safety profile, looking at how they're impacting our gut bacteria as well. And some of the initial pilot studies are suggesting that some of these might not be very good, specifically for some people more genetically susceptible to gut issues. So I think where people can, is thinking about making, their own food and reducing down some of these ultra-processed foods.
Yeah. And I think we talk a lot about, there's no such thing as an unhealthy food. There are unhealthy diets. So, it's exactly as you've just described. The majority, if you're eating, you're cooking from scratch, you're eating a variety of plants, then white chocolate doesn't matter. Is there anything, you mentioned ingredients that you're researching at the moment, is there anything that people should be looking out to actively avoid or nothing specific?
Yeah, look, I think at the moment I don't want to be an alarmist and say you need to cut out all the E numbers. But I think looking at the ingredients pack and thinking, are these sorts of ingredients which, I would have it in my own house. And a good example is actually bread, where, if to make bread at home, not many of us do it. I certainly don't tend to do it because of time, but you just need your flour, you need your yeast to kind of create the activation of the gas bubbles. You need a little bit of salt and water, just 4 ingredients, right? But if you go to the supermarket and buy a loaf of packaged bread, you'll notice that you usually have around 14 or so ingredients in it.
Yeah.
When you only actually need 4 to make it.
Yeah.
And if you have a look, a lot of them are actually food additives.
Right.
So they've got about 4 different types of food additives, extra added sugar. And again, having a little bit of sugar is fine, but you don't need to add it to your bread, right?
No.
You know, you wouldn't have it at home. So just, you know, checking the ingredients label, I think, is probably the best tip. And thinking about, well, actually, if I was going to make this at home, would I need to add all those ingredients? No. Okay, well, maybe, you know, I can occasionally have it, but not have it as an everyday food.
Yeah. Brilliant advice. Now, I want to talk a little bit about probiotics, because a lot of people sort of associate the two things together, happy guts and probiotics. But, you know, I'd love to know, and I'm sure lots of our listeners would love to know, what's the thinking behind that? What is a probiotic? What does it do? How do you incorporate it in your diet, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. So probiotics are live microorganisms which have actually been proven to have some health benefits attached to it. So in terms of the, you know, the probiotic world, I think it's important to realize that each different type of bacteria does different things, which is, again, why we want the maximum diversity of bacteria in our gut. And we have to feed them that diverse diet. So actually, just kind of taking any probiotic off the shelf in a supplement form is unlikely going to revolutionize your gut health or to have these health benefits. Certainly in my clinical practice, there are specific types of these bacteria and probiotics where I would recommend for specific indications. You know, some examples, if you have to go on antibiotics for whatever reason, then there's good evidence to take a type of bacteria called LGG, and you'll take that throughout your antibiotic period and for a week after to help reduce your risk of things like travelers of antibiotic-associated diarrhea. So it's those sort of, it sounds quite clinical, right?
It does,
But the good news is you can still nourish all the bacteria in your gut via feeding them the prebiotic word. So,
well, I was going to come on to that, because I've started, you know, we hear about prebiotics, don't really know the difference between the two. So if you could share that with the listeners, that'd be great.
It's only one letter. So understand why a lot of people get them confused. So prebiotics essentially is the fertilizer for the good bacteria. And most prebiotics are actually fibers, the dietary fibers, which come from all our plants. So if you're hitting your, you know, 30 plants a week, you're likely going to be getting enough of those prebiotics. Some of the really good sources are things like legumes, so chickpeas and butter beans and those sorts of ones.
What about fermented foods? Where do they fit in?
Yeah, really good. So they do contain some live microorganisms, but interestingly, we can't actually call them probiotics in the UK because of legislation. But I am a big advocate of including some fermented food in your diets, whether that's things like live yogurt, kefir, some kombucha, sauerkraut, kimchi, those sorts of things. I think is a really great opportunity, not just to add in some extra microbes, but also a lot of them contain these extra chemicals that the bacteria have produced that are thought to have some, you know, beneficial health effects in the body as well.
And they taste delicious.